Today, on Friday the 11th of August 2023, Amazon Prime released the first episode of their 4-part docu-series into Newcastle United called We Are Newcastle United. But what did we learn from that first episode? Here are 5 things I'd like to talk about. It's coming up. Welcome back, it's Eddie here from Tyneside Live. Can anybody guess where I am at the moment? Yeah, I'm in LEAZES Park, which sits just right behind Newcastle's LEAZES end, the Sir John Hall stand. It's Newcastle's oldest park. Tell you a little bit about it before we get into the docu-series. So it opened in 1873, like I say, Newcastle's oldest park. One of many around the UK, especially England, which was being built in the Victorian period. They're all very similar actually, centred around a lake like this. Newcastle's LEAZES Park actually had 2 lakes. The other one is gone now. They've actually put the tennis courts and basketball courts on there now. So, but also it's got the Victorian balustrade, stone terrace with the bandstand there, which has been refurbished a couple of times during its history, and a lovely little Italian cafe just the other side of this lake there. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the park in bits and pieces as I talk about the docu-series, but this is where I am today. So back at the docu-series, Helen and I were fortunate enough to be invited to the premiere of this Amazon docu-series at the Tyneside Cinema a few days ago, where we got to see the first 2 episodes, and I have to admit it was quite emotional in parts. The whole occasion, the crowd, the crowd in the cinema, the owners were there, Eddie Howe was there, some of the players were there. It was just a brilliant occasion, and I feel so lucky to be there. So certainly the first thing I learned is that this is not an all or nothing Amazon docu-series, a bit like the Arsenal or Man City ones. This is about Newcastle's history at this pivotal moment in the takeover. Although the docu-series centres on last season, the 2022-23 season, it does start with the actual takeover, with some interviews of Yasser Al-Rumayyan, our chairman, but also Amanda Staveley. So yeah, it goes back to, and it's more about the decisions of the board and the owners that are being made to help rebuild Newcastle United from the 14 years under Mike Ashley, which you could actually compare it to being in an abusive relationship. Actually, under Mike Ashley, there was the way he ran everything, the way he conducted himself, the lack of communication, the lack of drive, the lack of ambition. It was just an awful 14 years and drove our club into the ground. Really, we were completely soulless. So to kind of get a glimpse behind the scenes of the Newcastle takeover and how the owners felt about buying Newcastle for 305 million at the beginning of in October 21-22 season, it's really insightful. I think the second thing I need to cover is Amanda Staveley, because you really do get a glimpse into not only the businesswoman Amanda Staveley, but the personal side of Amanda Staveley. She admits in that first episode that she is wholly crazy in love with Newcastle United, and you can't hide that. That comes across in buckets about her feelings for Newcastle. She is clearly emotionally invested in the club, and she talks about that when she goes into the stadium on match day and how the hairs on her arms just stand up on end. She's really very emotional, but clearly as well, she's an all-rounder. She's a very intelligent businesswoman as well. She's obviously sold the idea and the concept of this investment of a Premier League club in Newcastle United to the PIF, in particular Yasser Al-Rumayyan, because of the fan base, because of the potential of what this club can be, how great it could be with the right foundations and the right investment. And yeah, I just wanted to mention about Amanda Staveley. She's a really very likeable character. I've met her now 3 or 4 times. I've interviewed her at Kingston Park at a women's match. I've seen how she is with fans. She's always got time for everybody. There's always a smile on her face. She's always interacting with fans, especially, for example, the women's match where she's chatting to the kids. Just a really warm, kind person who's clearly very intelligent. And it goes into a bit more detail about the Anthony Gordon purchase, which I'll come to in a second, but it also shows how determined she is, how she plays hardball in the transfers. She makes a comment of, I think they're bluffing. She wants to play hardball when she's having a chat with, I'm assuming, Yasser on the phone. So yeah, she clearly no pushover, and I think she's an owner that we need to be extremely proud of. Number 3, I think what strikes me is the comparison between the last time we were riding high under Kevin Keegan as a player and then as a manager. Of course, his first match under Keegan was in '82. I was at that game in the Gallagher end. I remember vividly standing amongst thousands behind the Gallagher end waiting to get through those turnstiles and walk up those steep steps. And then again, when he became a manager in '93, there was this euphoria amongst the Newcastle fans. I don't know what it is about Keegan, his aura, his charisma, but he just had that ability to hypnotise Newcastle, the city, and Newcastle United fans as well, and it was an amazing time. But it was almost a one-man band, you know, and that was deeply flawed because he was flawed as a coach, and it got us so far. So you get the sense when you watch this first episode of how different this new rebirth is of Newcastle United. This is much more, by and large, a team effort. Under our new owners, there's a much more of a strategic view and a plan to get the foundations right. That strategic vision, of course, under Yassir, who claims he doesn't make any day-to-day decisions for Newcastle United. He trusts and supports the owners to manage the club, particularly Amanda Staveley, who clearly runs the ship day to day. So yeah, there's a different kind of feel about the club now. So for me personally, that gives me a lot more optimism that even though success might take a little bit longer, you know that it's going to be, when it does come, it'll be sustainable, and that the owners, through team decisions, even Eddie Howe, who's crucial obviously as a top-class manager, he's just one component part in a very important team that collectively pull in the same direction to make the right decisions, get the right players in for the right money, for the right reasons.
If you'd like to see more videos like this and be notified the moment I release the next one, make sure you hit the subscribe button.
There's the old Victorian bandstand behind me getting some attention from some workers there. That was opened in 1879, I think, about 6 years after the park opened. So number 4, what struck me is the relationship between the club and money, because there's a lot of misconceptions with the club, and to go into a bit of detail in that first episode. And I did notice 2 or 3 times under the narration of Alan Shearer that they described the club as having the richest owners in world football. What they didn't say is that Newcastle United are the richest club in the world, which we're not by a country mile. We're not. Newcastle United are just a fraction of 1% of the PIF's investment portfolio for all the companies they invest in. We're clearly rich, and I'm glad they said that, because you know there are some individuals out there, I have to admit, really winds me up, individuals on social media platforms who have been claiming Newcastle are the world's richest club. It really doesn't help. It sets the wrong expectations among fans. So, but also as well, in the first episode they go to great pains to highlight the difficulties they face in terms of financial fair play, because clearly they've got money to spend, but the club doesn't make a lot of money in itself just yet. It is getting better, and as I think it was Mehrdad Gadusi said, look, financial fair play just means you can't spend more than you earn. Well, you can a little bit. And they give an example of the pursuit of Anthony Gordon, which clearly went on for quite a few months, and how they were forced to play hardball and quibble over 5 million or so in terms of getting them. Things were that tight under financial fair play. And also what comes across to me is that how the club owners won't be held to ransom to pay that new Newcastle tax, so to speak, where clubs are going to try and hold Newcastle to ransom for higher fees. Number 5, you can clearly see how important Eddie Howe is to the club, the future, the foundations, and how the owners feel about him. Clearly they love Eddie Howe. He is untested at this level. There's a bit of a risk going on, but I think they think he's the right man for the job. Yes, there was a blip last season. There's going to be blips in this coming season and the one after that. You have to expect that as part of this learning curve and rebuilding the club. I don't think his job's at any risk unless there was a serious downturn of form and we were getting dragged down the other end of the table, which I don't expect to happen at all. But Eddie Howe, what a manager, what a coach. What I love about him is his calmness and his balance, and he's really pragmatic. When he's asked a question, you can see his eyes go up as he searches for the right words. He doesn't react emotionally to anything. His emotions are in check. He's not overly emotionally invested in the club, and I love that about him, because he can maintain that bit of impartiality and that rational decision making. And I just hope Eddie Howe goes on from strength to strength, and it really comes across in this docu-series how lucky we are to have a manager like Eddie Howe, 45, 46 years old, how reflective he is. He's a student of the game. He's always determined to learn new skills, new things, new ways of doing things. He's a people person. He invests himself in the players. He likes to get to know them and their families and their personal life. There was a lot going on clearly with Kieran Trippier when he arrived at Newcastle. You had a little glimpse there of the family problems he had with his wife trying to settle in Madrid. She didn't have any friends, she didn't know the language. And even Kieran Trippier said, the family is more important than football. And Eddie Howe will have played a big part in helping to persuade Kieran Trippier to come to Newcastle at a risk at the time, and to put an arm around him and to look after him and look after his family. And clearly Kieran Trippier is a very, very happy man and a happy family. So I can't sing the praises of Eddie Howe enough. There you go, those are my humble observations about episode 1 of this new Amazon Prime series. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I've got a load more views I'd love to share. I'll probably save them for future episodes and talk about them then. So I just love the whole feel-good factor that docu-series brought, putting things into perspective, give us an insight into how they're rebuilding the club. Happy days, man.